The United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panicking. A new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, and patient, and greatness will be the result. Welcome. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. We are live all across social media. And the topic of the show today is tariffs. Don't be a panicking. I want to show you something. That was President Trump speaking to the American people this morning as stocks plummeted late last week and people were a little antsy about how the week today was going to start. But I want to back up here for a second. I want to back up and address some of you smart Alex. Ha ha ha. You smart Alex are hilarious with your community note. A community note, of course, is a crowdsourced fact check of sorts that appears below some posts on X. It's an Elon Musk invention. It's instead of the fact checkers that we saw on Facebook that were essentially leftist funded organizations that were just pushing their agenda on content from us that they didn't like. A community note allows the community on X to make a note, as the name suggests, if they think that there's additional context or information that should be added to the content of the post. Now, my post on tariffs went viral over the weekend, and some of y'all smacked one of my tariffs, this viral tariff post, with a community note, and it might just be the funniest community note that I have ever seen on X. We're going to show you that in just a second. I think, actually, I might have been the only person laughing. Even the crowd that was behind upvoting this community note, I don't think you thought it was as funny as I thought it was, and I'm going to tell you why. So this is the post. This is the post that went viral over the weekend. It prompted some backlash, and you'll see why in just a second. Let me read it to you. It says, or I said, maybe, just maybe, you've been propagandized about tariffs by the same uniparty elitists who imposed deadly open borders on you. If your reaction to Trump's tariffs is, oh no, it's basically a tax, stuff is going to get more expensive, then buckle up. Here's the truth about tariffs. At the onset of what we call global free trade, we were told three different things. Number one, we were told that trading with China, NAFTA, and globalization would promote democracy around the world. Number two, we were told that products in our country would become cheaper. And number three, we were told as a result of the first two things that our lives would be improved, life would be better. Well, decades later, the first thing sure didn't happen. The communist Chinese are as despotically authoritarian and inhumane as ever. And look at the EU crackdown on speech, or look at our own government weaponized against us. Yeesh. Products, of course, did get cheaper, but at what cost? We were promised that our quality of life would be improved by cheap products, but was it? No, it wasn't. In fact, the opposite happened. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. To be specific and numeric here, between the year 2000 and 2017, 5.5 million American manufacturing jobs left our country. That means that millions of Americans, and a critically important point here, mostly men, were suddenly out of work. And what happened? What happens when the jobs are just gone? When men want to provide for their families but can't? When men lose the dignity of their work. As we soon found out, many of these men turned to drugs that are readily available in this country thanks to the free trade politicians who deliberately left our borders open and then turned a blind eye to the trafficking of deadly fentanyl across our border from the very countries, China, Mexico, Canada, we were supposed to benefit from trading with. Between 1999 and 2021, more than 640,000 Americans died from opioid overdose. Why did this happen? Because entire communities, places, for example, like where Vice President J.D. Vance is from, 20 minutes from me, were hollowed out as their manufacturing jobs were shipped overseas. And then the same countries who stole our jobs sent fentanyl across our borders to kill us. Tariffs. The dreaded word. Tariffs not only stop impertinent countries from taking advantage of us, which is a big deal, tariffs will stop the flow of fentanyl into our neighborhoods, which is a moral imperative. If countries around the world, especially our trading partners, don't stop sending drugs, then they get slapped with crushing tariffs. President Trump understands leverage. He knows that these tariffs will force such countries to crack down on fentanyl. And let's talk about cheap products. Is the trade, yes, pun intended here, worth it? Is a lead-poisoned purse from Shein for $2 worth surrendering our supply chains to foreign nations that hate us? Do you want to rely on China for antibiotics? Do you think it's smart to rely on Taiwan for semiconductors? Think of the empty shelves in grocery stores during COVID. We can all picture it. Our supply chains in our country are fragile. It is a national security threat to rely on foreign countries for things that our families need. Tariffs help bring back manufacturing and reliance to our country, to our states, to our communities, to our workers. Make no mistake, other countries will cave here. They have to. They rely on the American economy too much to refuse President Trump here, and they actually can't wait him out because he's doing this right now. He's president for the next 4 years. Trump, of course, is the perfect person to use tariffs as the means to an end. Tariffs are a tool. The end is an actual better quality of life, security, prosperity for the American people that we were promised by the lying elitists that ended up stealing that from us, and now Trump is reclaiming that for you. In summary, I posted, I love tariffs. Stop freaking out, everyone. This is going to be awesome. Now, in response to this, some of you smart Alex upvoted a community note on the bottom of this, and we can show this on the screen, that said, it's, as I said, remember, a community note is a crowdsourced fact check. And this fact check reads, a tariff is actually a giant tax hike on Americans. And the source is Liz Wheeler and a tweet from 2018. Ha ha ha. You guys got me. I changed my mind on an issue. And that's true. I did change my mind on this issue, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's not political flip-flopping. Political flip-flopping is, of course, when a politician speaks to one demographic of people and says something in a pandering way because that politician thinks that that group of people wants to hear that, and then goes to another group of people and says something contradictory because that politician thinks that group of people wants to hear something different. That's flip-flopping. Changing your mind should be the natural evolution of how we think when we learn new things. And so I posted in response, I said, true. I used to oppose tariffs. As some of you are pointing out, guess what? I also used to support the Iraq War and the legalization of marijuana. I was wrong. My opinions changed when my eyes opened to the reality that libertarianism is a farce. Without ordered liberty, grounded in objective reality, our society fails. That applies to free trade and to tariffs too, not just political philosophy. I also once fell for the tariffs are a tax talking point. And I express today no contempt to those of you echoing that still. I'm inviting you to change your mind like I did, which is why I made the complete case for tariffs in my post to explain my support in depth and encourage you to join me based on facts. And then I actually saw this community note before it was public. You can see it when it's on your own post, when it is simply in the queue, when it hasn't received enough upvotes to be publicly viewed. But I saw it when it was before it got to that point. And I actually texted it to my producer and I was like, I hope this becomes public because it is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And when it did become public, I posted and I said, I'm laughing my head off at this community note. You smart Alex, you are hilarious. I speak frequently about the transformation of my political philosophy for this exact reason, so that people who aren't yet based, and the definition of based means based in reality, start being based about politics. And then I said, while you're here, please consider changing your mind on forever wars, marijuana, video games, and libertarianism, in addition to tariffs. All that being said, I do get the emotion. I see it. I hear it. I understand it. I also have a stock portfolio that's taken a significant hit over the past couple of days. I totally get the emotion from people. If you watch your portfolio on a daily basis, which, by the way, is not a good habit, don't be doing that. However, we all got in the habit of doing that because Joe Biden was destroying our wealth. There is a big difference between watching our investments, our retirement accounts disappear because Joe Biden is actually destroying our money and our wealth. There's a difference between that and what's happening now, which is a tool. These tariffs that President Trump is using are a tool to eventually increase the value of our money and the value of bringing these jobs back to our country. This is President Trump's economic strategy. We'll get into this a little bit more depth later in the show. His economic strategy is a multi-pronged strategy. I understand if you look at tariffs through a very narrow lens, you're just looking at tariffs, that it's a scarier prospect. But if you look at tariffs as one of the tools that President Trump is deploying in a multi-pronged approach, then it begins to make more sense. And I think the emotion that many people are feeling, understandable emotion, as you watch your 401k shrinking, two things help mitigate that emotion. The first thing is understanding that it's very different what's happening now than watching Biden destroy our wealth. And if you understand that, you don't feel quite as desperate or quite as panicked as you might if Trump were destroying our wealth, which he's not. But also, we need to have expectations of what's to come. We need to understand the process for Trump's economic strategy. And once you understand what to expect and what in the different phases or the different stages of this economic strategy, then again, you don't feel panicked. You don't feel as frightened of what's to come, and this emotion will be better regulated. So I want to give a concrete example pardon me, of some of these people, even on our own side on the right, because this has been a very divisive issue. It's not just a left versus right. There are many friendlies who amongst the right who are going after Trump, or who were going after me for this post on X. And I want to explain something here, and I'm going to use a specific example. There's an individual who works for the Washington Examiner. His name is David Harsanyi. You might be familiar with his writing. I think he's an editor over there now. And he was going after me pretty hard on X partially for changing my mind, which I don't care about that. No one thinks that I pander. No one thinks that I'm a mouthpiece for the administration. I style myself as a critical supporter of the Trump administration, meaning I am my philosophy is a very America first philosophy when it comes to politics, but I think the best way to help an administration be successful is to give constructive criticism. It helps sharpen the administration to make sure that they are being the most effective that they can. And there's a couple of examples that I can even give you if anybody is, if anyone needs an example here. The first example would be a couple weeks ago, I went on Glenn Beck's radio show, and I was not just criticizing, I was beyond criticizing the Trump administration for their executive order on in vitro fertilization. That's the wrong move, and we should all be comfortable saying this. No one should be viewing what they say through a lens of this absolute loyalty standard. I've always rejected that. And the second thing is the Surgeon General nominee that the Trump administration, that President Trump has put forward, Dr. Jeanette Nishiwat. I have been the loudest voice, at the forefront of saying that she should not be the Surgeon General, that's a bad pick for Trump. And I was criticizing this to give him the information necessary to withdraw her nomination because she was a COVID freak. All that being said, the criticism from David Harsanyi was, I guess he was, calling me a grifter or whatever, a mouthpiece of the administration, which is not true. But he was also criticizing me for changing my mind. And there's a couple of things that I want to say. First of all, changing your mind when you get new information that better informs you is a good thing. It's not only a sign of intelligence, it's a sign of humility, and it's something that we should all be open to. That's the premise of the show: is question our assumptions, question everything, see if you're right. But it's also a fundamental mistake that some people on our side are making when it comes to how they're viewing political policy. And this is where I want to give you a specific example relating to David Harsanyi. And the example here is these people on the right who are criticizing Trump are actually falling prey to the mindset of the Republican establishment. They're falling prey to the experts, the same way that they fell prey to the experts during COVID. And the specific example that I'm going to give to you regarding David Harsanyi is his viewpoint on vaccines. He very frequently, or I should not very frequently, multiple times, David Harsanyi has criticized RFK Jr.'s stance on vaccines, or my support of RFK Jr. on vaccines. And his reason is, but studies show the whatever vaccine, whether it's the COVID vaccine or the MMR vaccine, I think was specifically what he said, to be safe. But studies, he said, well, this is the classic fallacy of the expert. This is the experts. He's falling for technocracy. So when he says, but the studies show that XYZ vaccine is safe, well, tell me the details of those studies, please. Tell me the details specifically of the control groups in these studies that you're mentioning. Did those studies use real placebos when they were testing the vaccine and the safety of that vaccine against a placebo? Or did those studies use so-called placebos that were actually just another vaccine for the control groups? Or even worse, did they use, instead of simple saline injections, did they use saline with aluminum, which is part of the problem with some of these vaccines? And see, this is my point. The blind trust, and I'll leave you to infer what the actual answer in many of those studies are. Of course, the answer is they are not studies that were done in an ethical way. They are studies that were intended to cover up the harm of the vaccine by using placebos that were not really placebos. And this is the point. The blind trust of the experts, simply because they are the experts, is a problem. And David Harsanyi fell into this trap because he didn't actually refute any of the points that I made in my post. He simply cited a bunch of great people like Milton Friedman and Winston Churchill saying that they were against tariffs. Okay, well, they were against tariffs. Do you think that every single thing that comes out of their mouth, simply because it comes out of their mouth, is correct? Do you think that there's a possibility that they might be wrong? Do you think that there are certain times in history where certain tactics work and other times in history where other tactics work better? Again, the points that I made, I was very careful in this post. The points that I made about tariff was not just a rah tariffs. The point that I made was, yes, my mind has changed on tariffs, and here's why. Because the ultimate question, and this is what you should ask yourself, this is what you should ask your friends, this is what you should ask dissenters of Trump's tariff policies, anybody who is being emotional or anybody who is against it, ask them this. Are you okay with the current state of things in our country? Are you okay with countries taking advantage of us? Are you okay with millions of American jobs being sent overseas? Are you okay with the millions of men who are out of work? Are you okay with fentanyl flowing freely over our borders from the very countries we're supposed to be trading with? Are you okay with the overdose deaths, 640,000 of them in the past 20 years? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with fragile supply chains that could break at the slightest disruption and leave Americans without antibiotics and oil and semiconductors? All for what? So that you can buy some cheap knockoff products on Amazon for a couple of bucks? You know, Stephen Miller articulated in probably the best way that I've seen one of the cardinal problems. He called it the original sin of free trade. And I'm going to let you listen to this right now. Go ahead. This is Stephen Miller.
The original sin of how the modern economy in America is structured, the president talks about more than anything else. And it gets to Caroline's point about the overall economic vision. The original sin was that we created a tax system that punished you for making something in America and rewarded you for making something in China or a foreign country. So in other words, if you had your factory in America, you paid a sky-high corporate tax rate, you were beaten to death with regulation, you had radically unaffordable energy prices, and Washington just in every way made your life miserable.
And the political class didn't do anything about it. They allowed it to happen.
Correct.
Well, they sat by and watched it happen for decades.
They actually wanted the opposite to happen, especially if you look at the 90s when we had NAFTA, we had the WTO, we had the entry of China into the WTO. The goal very clearly was to remove U.S. tariff and trade barriers to make it easier for people to outsource to China. Because once we gave China what we call permanent normal trade relations, all of your manufacturers in the United States who are thinking in short terms, in terms of quarterly earnings and that kind of thing, they said, listen, now I can go move my factory from Indiana or wherever, I can put it in China, I can put it in Mexico, and I know I will have sure access to the U.S. market. Today, President Trump is saying the best place to make American products and sell American products is here in America.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the answer to the question, of course, the questions that I posed before, are you okay with the current state of things in the United States? I'm not okay with that. It's a tired, old, harmful way of thinking. In fact, I would phrase it even stronger than that. Your way didn't work. And I care a lot more about reality than I do about theory. The reality is that, the smart Alex on the community note, or the people who are pushing back against the Trump tariffs, the reality is that you're emotional because your 401k dipped. And I get that. Nobody wants to see losses in their portfolio. I don't either. But don't sell today and tomorrow. It'll come back. The old way of doing things, it's over. You had your chance. It's like fiscal conservatives. Back in December, remember there was this showdown between the fiscal conservatives in Congress. Chip Roy was the leader of that. And President Trump on this omnibus spending bill. This was the week before Christmas. And we are fiscal conservatives. Based conservatives are fiscal conservatives. And we agree in principle with the Chip Roy fiscal conservative philosophy. And yet, I argued for President Trump's way of doing things, even though it wasn't reducing spending in that omnibus bill to the extent that Chip Roy wanted it to be. I argued for President Trump's way of doing things because the fiscal conservatives in the GOP, even the very good faith, very sincere, very authentic ones, haven't been successful. Their words sound really nice, but their ways, their tactics simply didn't work. We were caught in this repeating cycle of getting these continuing resolutions where there was this threat of a government shutdown and this fight over what's going to be cut. And the ultimate end of these fights every single time was this very minimal amount being cut, and this huge deficit and huge amount of spending continued. And so in December, the argument that I made was, okay, we do need to cut spending in our country. But the old way of doing it, this fiscal conservative way, didn't cut it. It just didn't work. So we are going to try something new. We are going to do it Trump's way. We are going to doge the administrative state. We are going to find waste and fraud and abuse. And that is how we're going to cut spending. And of course, that turned out to be, Trump was right, Elon Musk was right, I was right. It turned out to be the most effective way of being a fiscal conservative. Elon Musk, at the behest of Donald Trump, has doged more money, meaning he has stopped more spending than all of these fiscal conservatives have in their entire tenure in Congress. And like I said, I mean this with no disrespect to some of these people personally, because personally I understand that their principles are sincere, but this same framework applies to tariffs right now. Okay, theoretically, the idea of free trade sounds nice. Let's do business globally so that we can all have more opportunities and create more wealth. That sounds great. But did it work the way that we were told? Since especially the early 1990s, did we see an increase of democracy? Did we see better and cheaper products? Did this increase our way of life? Well, no. The cheaper products, sure, we may have cheaper products, but at what cost? The reality of the theory that sounded nice was not what we were promised. And so maybe, just maybe, it's time to do something a different way. Maybe, just maybe, when President Trump said, we are going to stop the trade deficits with all these countries around the world that are taking advantage of us. And you know what? It's simply the most practical way to do it, by doing it all at once, by smacking these tariffs on countries that are calculated based on the trade deficit. It's going to bring them all to the table. So what happened? What actually is happening right now, besides the dip in the stock market? Well, I'll show you what's happening. We're going to get to that in just a second. A big part of this story, by the way, is also protecting our supply chains. This is a bigger threat than most people realize in our country. We all got a peek of it two different times. We got a peek of it during COVID, and we got a peek of it when we had that container backup. Remember those container ships off of LA? When we saw how fragile our supply chain is, this is a big part of the story here, to be prepared when the unexpected happens. And you've heard me talk about My Patriot Supply because I trust them when it comes to my family's well-being. And I just got word they are doing something that they have never done before. Right now, you can get the best-selling mega 3-month emergency food supply for the same price as the standard kit. That's more than $360 worth of real beef, real chicken, plus farm fresh fruits and vegetables included at no extra charge. Even better, the kit now gives you 2,500 calories a day, more than any other emergency food supply that I've ever seen. And let's be honest, when things go sideways, you are going to need more than just survival. You need strength, you need energy, you need real food. This kit will be there when you need it. It stays fresh for up to 25 years, and it ships fast and discreetly. If you've been waiting for the right time, this is it. Go to preparewithliz.com and claim your mega kit while this offer lasts. That's preparewithliz.com, preparewithliz.com. Okay, so what happened over the weekend since President Trump slapped these tariffs on countries around the world? And I understand, by the way, that some people's criticism of this is, well, I was okay with the idea of reciprocal tariffs if there was a country taking advantage of us, but how were these calculated? People are saying, are these reciprocal tariffs? Well, no, they're not just reciprocal tariffs. They are tariffs that take into account the trade deficit that we are experiencing with countries around the world. So what happened? What happened? While Trump was on the golf course winning the senior championship, you can see pictures of that, quite funny, he got phone calls from 50 countries around the world. Let me say that again. 50 countries around the world called President Trump begging him to negotiate because they cannot tolerate the tariffs that he put on their economies. In fact, it wasn't just countries like Taiwan. The European Union publicly stated that they are ready for a 0-for-0 tariff situation. And this is where it just seems very obvious to me that if you put a pin in the emotion of watching your portfolios take a dip, and you understand that these tariffs are one prong in President Trump's economic strategy, and it's already coming to fruition. The goal here is for tariffs to be a tool, a means to an end. And we are already seeing it. We are already seeing global trade inch closer to what we were promised originally 30 years ago, but we never saw, which is a 0-for-0 situation. So President Trump talked to world leaders all weekend, which has been reported. 50 different countries called. Taiwan offers 0 tariffs. The EU says they are ready to talk about offering 0-for-0 tariffs. My question to those who have been against the tariffs so far is, do you not think this is a good sign? Is this not a net positive for the American economy and even eventually for you? When the fright recedes, when the lack of confidence in our market stabilizes, which it will, do you not see this as being a positive way of moving forward, a reset on the Great Reset? I'd be hard-pressed to take anybody seriously who views the developments that happened over the weekend and says, no, this is not going to be a good thing. This is not good now to have the EU ready to negotiate. This is not good for President Trump to be renegotiating our trade agreements with 50 countries. Maybe what's left is a necessity. Maybe what's left is people would benefit from having expectations of what this process is going to look like. There was a man named Ed Dowd. He's a former BlackRock manager who obviously left BlackRock. He was on Bannon's War Room. And he was talking about what this process is going to look like. When people are saying, how long is my portfolio going to be down? What's going to happen to the prices of products that we need? He laid out what people can expect to see, meaning how long things are going to be dipped down before they're going to climb back up. And I think that the American people would benefit from expectations like this. Let's take a listen for a second to Ed Dowd.
Two things. We're still analyzing the tariffs, but there's a lot of confusion, a lot of hand-wringing, a lot of takes and emotions. It could have been communicated a little better, but it looks like the Trump administration decided to put the end goal out there. We want 0. We want deficits to be 0. This is how we calculate the tariff, and let's now come to the table and figure this out, rather than go into all the legal documents, looking at all, how much time it would take to negotiate every little product and every little reciprocal tariff. This is just a way to get people to the table, and I think it's going to yield some benefits down the line. This is a dynamic process, but there's a lot of confusion. I think it's a way to cut through all the time it would take to negotiate with each country one by one on reciprocal tariffs. It's like, this is the end goal. And let's start and come to the table and see what we can talk about. That's what I think the purpose ultimately was, and I think that's the goal. It actually saves a lot of time, because I think they would have been bogged down for months trying to figure this out. That's opinion number one. Opinion number two, on the economy, the stock market. Look, fraudulent elections have catastrophic consequences, as you've often said. The last 2 to 3 years of this economy have been fraudulent, and we have a stock market bubble. All-time valuations. Trump inherited that. It was coming down regardless. And his policies were going to shut off the liquidity spigot from the government, and this was bound to happen. Tariffs are the reason du jour. But quite honestly, we were topping out since December. There were warning signs in the market. The AI bubble burst in February, and now the trade tariffs have just fed on it. This is phase one, stock market bubble bursting. If I'm a betting man, we're getting close to some sort of washout low and maybe a massive recovery as more and more countries come to the table. So this is phase one. We'll have a relief rally, but then we're going to have to deal with the housing crisis that was caused by the aliens. They priced a lot of people out of the market. We're going to have a housing correction, a housing recession. So, the Trump administration is realigning the economy, restructuring the economy. I think home prices going down will be a good thing for the middle class. And this is very painful to the financial elite, but to the average man, as long as he keeps his job, should have more opportunities down the road. But it's not going to be pretty. It's going to take a long time, but it had to be done because the other way was a currency crisis and a loss of reserve currency status if we kept going the way we were going.
So this would be my advice to President Trump and to his administration officials, whether this is Treasury Secretary, whether this is the Economic Council, whether this is Press Secretary. This is my advice to the Trump administration. Two takeaways from what Ed Dowd said are very key here. The first one is dynamic process. People understand. We're not stupid. We're very smart people. The voters in our country have intuition about what's good and what's bad and what's harmful and what's not. If you package, present, explain the tariff strategy as a dynamic process, people understand that it means a multi-pronged approach. And then the second thing that you have to pair, Ed Dowd did this very, very well. I thought that was a very brilliant breakdown. He said there's a lot of confusion. He used the word confusion. I used the word emotion earlier. But if you explain, if you set people's expectations that this is a dynamic process, and right now there's a lot of confusion about it, but you just untangle it. Be honest with the American people about how this process is going to look. This is phase one. Here's what comes next. Here's what comes after that. People actually are very patient. They are willing to watch their portfolios take a dip if they know it's going to recover. It's the fact that we all have PTSD from Joe Biden, watching him destroy our wealth. We knew that when our portfolios took a dip under Biden, it ain't coming back. Communicate to the American people. It's a dynamic process. There's some confusion, but here are the markers to watch for along the road to recovery. And you'll be surprised. The American people want to be supportive. We are, and this is how we should be, very human nature. We are protectionists of ourselves as individuals, of our families, of our futures. And if we're confused about whether or not something that we felt was secure, our investments are tenuous or not, then you're going to lose support. But the support is still there deep down. So just people would benefit from expectations, which is why, of course, President Trump's vote of confidence, if you will, this is what I call tough love from the president. He said, "Don't be a panican," a Republican who panics. Don't be a panican. That's his way of saying keep calm and carry on. He's got it under control. Now, the left, of course, and I want to separate those on the right who are criticizing these tariffs with those on the left. Those on the left are not just emotional because they're elitists who are watching their portfolios take a dip. The left actively wants a recession. It's part of their Trump derangement syndrome. They want nothing more than for Donald Trump to be a failure, even if it harms you. So please separate the left's criticism. It's not good faith. They don't actively see a problem with tariffs. It's not something that they're calling foul or offering constructive criticism. It's not something that they've let their emotion blind them to the reality of the situation or something on which they haven't yet fully evolved in their political process, that they're still clinging to the old GOP establishment way of doing things, and they're hesitant to jump into this new based way of looking at reality first versus old political philosophy. No. The left wants a recession. It's Trump derangement syndrome, so just ignore those people. So now we come to the point of this. I mentioned this earlier, the multi-prong approach to how Trump is approaching the economy. And Chris Ruddy from Newsmax, he's the CEO of Newsmax, he best summed this up in a post on X, which I'm going to read to you. He said, "I had a lengthy call with Donald Trump yesterday. The president congratulated me on Newsmax's successful IPO this week on the New York Stock Exchange. I can't reveal all the details," he said, "but here's what you need to know. Tariffs are just one part of Trump's economic plan. The U.S. is showing resolve to China the EU and others, no more massive trade imbalances. Deals are to come. The U.S. has caved for too long. Under Donald J. Trump, no loser deals. The Trump plan gets fair deals. More U.S. exports, meaning jobs here, more investment in the United States. The Trump economic plan has 5 pillars. Number 1, cut taxes. Number 2, deregulation. Number 3, cheaper oil. Number 4, lower interest rates. Number 5, better trade deals. The 5 pillars means massive cash flooding into our economy. Tariffs, which you can look at as rebalancing, are being implemented early, but look at the big picture, the 5 pillars. Give it time. My saying of the day, Chris Reddy concludes, is Trump doesn't walk on water, but he does turn water into wine. Okay, well, that's a bit edgy. But think about these 5 pillars for a second. So if you cut taxes and you deregulate our economy, that instantly boosts our economy. As for pillar number 3, cheaper oil, well, we're already seeing this. We can actually show this on the screen. This is a chart of the oil prices. And I'm going to bring this up here too. The chart of the oil prices. Look at the price of oil globally. Okay, well, the oil prices are already down almost 20%, between 15 and 20% year to date. Already, this 5th pillar is happening. And then go back, Tim, for a second to the Chris Reddy post on X. So after cheaper oil, which is already happening, number 4, the 4th pillar is lower interest rates. Well, isn't this already being discussed by the Fed? Already the Fed is saying, well, we might cut interest rates. So great. The 4th pillar is underway. And number 5, better trade deals. Well, if you have 50 countries calling President Trump over the weekend to renegotiate, we have all 5 of these pillars are part of this dynamic process. And they're all happening at once. And it doesn't happen overnight. And when people are confused about what to expect, they're fearful about just one pillar if they're looking at it through that narrow window of just looking at tariffs. But when you look at it all 5 things together, this is going to reset the Great Reset on our economy. And we're not going to be on the verge then of a housing bubble and a stock market bubble, which we were already threatened with long before Trump, thanks to Joe Biden. He's correcting these things, but sometimes correcting these things doesn't come without temporary pain. And I think it's perfectly fine. It's appropriate. It's honest. And it requires a politician of integrity to admit that, yes, it comes with some temporary pain, but if you don't sell your stock portfolio, then it shouldn't impact you in too painful of a way. And we're going to conclude this segment by saying, if you have any comments, any dissent, any criticism, go ahead and drop it in the chat. This is going to be a continuous conversation because it's not a one and done. Okay, we fact checked that, we corrected the record. This is an ongoing thing that we are going to be experiencing in our country. But of course, Treasury Secretary Bessent summed it all up nicely, and you can take a listen to that here.
The people who are hoping that yesterday's move will lead to a demonstrably brighter future within 4 years, is it your sincere prediction that within 4 years we'll say, actually, that kind of worked?
I believe that it's going to work, and I know that what we were doing wasn't working.
Yes.
So I think we have to try this, and I have a high confidence ratio it's going to work. And I have a very high confidence ratio. The good news is we have President Trump's previous term when everyone said none of this was going to work. Oh, the China tariffs are going to do this. They're going to cause inflation. They didn't. This is going to happen to working class. It's going to be bad for working class Americans. Well, guess what? Working class Americans, the hourly workers did better than supervisory workers. The bottom 50% of households, their net worth increased faster than the top 10% of households. And look, I'm not happy with what's going on in the market today, but the distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities, 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills. They rent their homes. They have auto loans, and we've got to give them some relief. That I was struck by the statistic from last year.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
And my question I guess as a bystander too, to echo Tucker Carlson there, is does this not give you some confidence in this process? And I mean, if not, you can tell me why not, but does it not give you some confidence in the process? So the message, of course, from President Trump is don't be weak, don't be stupid, don't be a panicking. All right. There's something weird going on with Bobby Kennedy, with RFK Jr., something very strange going on that I think we need to discuss. And I think we have a role to play in correcting what's going on with Bobby Kennedy, because it's very odd, and it's not something that we, MAHA Nation, should accept. We should, well, as I said earlier, giving criticism or giving constructive criticism is a way of sharpening a politician that you support to make sure that they're the most effective. And RFK Jr. needs to be corrected. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Also, The Guardian has a story about what really happened with the Mike Waltz, Jeffrey Goldberg signal chat thing. And I don't know if I buy this explanation from The Guardian. They've been pretty anti-Trump, but maybe I do. There's something pretty interesting in this story. I do still have one major hang-up. We're going to get to both of those things in just a second, but I do want to talk to you about ivermectin first. The ivermectin playbook that was imposed on us during COVID is not an isolated incident. This is not tyranny that happened just during COVID and then was dispensed with. What happened is the FDA, the CDC, public health officials, politicians, doctors, pharmacists told us, don't take ivermectin for COVID. They said it's a horse drug, a cow drug. Don't take it. And the reason they told us not to take it is because if they had allowed us to take that for COVID-19, then they would not have secured their emergency use authorization for the COVID mRNA jab. So they lied to us to profit themselves. And I refuse to put my family in a situation ever again, where we do not have access to the resources or the medication that we need when we think we need it. That's why I'm proud to partner with All Family Pharmacy. They offer over 200 different medications and bundled emergency packages directly to you to ensure that you are ready for anything. At the heart of this effort is the Make America Healthy Again movement, which is a call for you to take control of your health and prepare for the unexpected. And if you find yourself in a pinch, if you're not quite as prepared as you should have been, it's okay. All Family Pharmacy has you covered with overnight delivery. Go check them out. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Because you are part of this movement, use code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, code Liz10. Also, Joe Biden, remember that guy? Man, did he wreak havoc on our country. The U.S. dollar is still facing unprecedented inflation thanks to Joe Biden. Can't be corrected by Trump overnight. It's a scary prospect to think that globalist politicians and even Democrats in our own country domestically are still trying to control us, even after the mandate we gave to President Trump to get rid of them. They're still seeking to control you, and they're using your money to do it. Think about the new digital dollar that they want to introduce. This is a Chinese Communist Party social credit score system that could be coming to us. That's why it's never been more important than to take control over your wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars or controlling politicians. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I did this. Part of our wealth portfolio is now in physical gold and silver. It allows us to have the confidence that our money is not going to be used to control us. American Hartford Gold is a fabulous company. They support content like this because we are committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. Again, that's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. Okay. There's something strange going on with RFK. What on earth is happening with RFK Jr. right now? I think it's worthy of investigating. I mean, we certainly need to understand what's happening here because there's some weird stuff that's going on right here. Unfortunately, if you're watching this on YouTube, we cannot discuss this on YouTube for reasons that will become obvious when you go to one of the other platforms where we post the show. So please check out blazetv.com/Liz, or we have video on Spotify now. You can go over to Spotify and watch over there. You can also go to X for the rest of the show, especially if you want to see it if you want to see it live, but YouTube, their terms of service prohibits us from talking about the following topic, which, as I said, once you go to another platform and watch this topic, you'll understand why. But it's a real head scratcher what's happening with RFK Jr. right now. Very strange. All right. We are over our time today, although we still have other topics to talk about. We will have to save those for tomorrow, specifically the Guardian report on the Mike Waltz, Jeffrey Goldberg signal chat scandal. We are going to talk about that tomorrow because the Guardian is kind of an, well, they're notorious, actually, not kind of. They're notorious for being anti-Trump, but they have a really interesting report on what really happened behind that signal chat infiltration by Jeffrey Goldberg. I'm not sure if I buy it. I kind of do. But there's one element that I just can't get over. I have one hang up about it. So we're definitely going to cover that tomorrow, although we don't have time for that today. Before we sign off, we do have one clip that I really, really want you to see. This is President Trump. He's hosting the World Series champion LA Dodgers today at the White House. And if this is not classic Trump, the reason that you love him, then I don't know what is. Take a look.
Congratulations, Brian. And others, we have a couple of senators here. I just don't particularly like them, so I won't introduce. Over the course of this amazing season, the members of this team I didn't think it was that big a deal, actually. Washington. Over the course of this amazing season, the members of this team gave us some of the most incredible.
Wait, did he say who it was when he turned and put his hand back? Did he say which senators were there that he doesn't particularly like? Oh, it was the California. Well, who likes the California senators? Classic Trump. Classic Trump. That's why we love him. If you don't think that's funny, then I always say, if you don't think Trump's funny, then you need to have more fun in your life, because even if you aren't politically aligned with Trump, he's hysterical, like stand-up comedian level funny. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panickin'. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe on all the platforms, especially those of you who are watching on YouTube. Subscribe on anywhere else so that you can watch our RFK segment, because you're going to want to see that. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.